Wow. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Work with What You Got podcast. This is episode number 8. My name is Devin, aka Dina Chaitanya. And on today's episode, I have a coach of mine, a mentor of mine. His name is Nakula Das. I don't know if you all have ever heard of him, but he runs something called, it used to be called the Semen Retention Army. I'm not actually sure if it still goes by that name. But as far as I know, now we're calling it the Powerhouse Man Group. So yeah, welcome, Nakula. Thank you very much for joining me on today's episode. And yeah, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate our relationship. And yeah, the Semen Retention Army is how we started. We don't go by that anymore, but still, some people still know, the Semen Retention Army, and they still come up to me and they're like, General. And I still love it.
Yeah.
And I'll still salute you and be like, what's going down? And now, yeah, we've evolved so much over the last few years that we have. The reason we don't do the Semen Retention Army is because we've also evolved into leadership development and business development and training. So we're offering so much more now, but at the core of what we do, semen retention is at the core of what we do at the Nakula Does training grounds.
Okay. So just a quick one. Why did it change from semen retention to Powerhouse Man Group?
Yeah, well, because as we continue to evolve and more students became enrolled into the programs, there was a natural evolution or progression into, all right, now I'm retaining semen. Now what? What do I do with it? I've just got all this pent up energy. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great question. We need to evolve this. And so, bringing in leadership development, how to transition, taking all that energy that you're cultivating through the practice of semen retention and actually still learning. Like many of the guys that I work with are, they're either single or in a relationship, they're in household life, they want to, be able to connect with their wives or their partners in an intimate way. So there's comes sexual alchemy, how to have non-ejaculatory sex, non-ejaculatory orgasms, how to be responsible with your sexual energy. And then what do you do with it outside of the bedroom? Because you've got all this vibrancy, you've got all this vitality, you've got all this drive. Well, now we're teaching leadership development skills, communication skills. I've built a multiple six-figure coaching business. And so I'm opening up the hood of my business and my systems and processes. And I'm allowing all of our students to look at all that so that they can do that in their own lives. And some guys are going on and they're starting their own coaching and training businesses. We've got real estate developers, we've got financial planners, we've got furniture store owners and contractors. So we have men at all different levels of leadership and life. And so it just evolved way beyond just semen retention. But again, semen retention, and not just semen retention, but really the process of sex transmutation, learning to consciously use that energy and work with it in a very conscious way is what we're about. And that was inspired by, the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, specifically chapter 11, The Secrets of Sex Transmutation. So we went from simply helping guys retain their semen and quit porn to now we're a full men's leadership development training school.
Okay, I can see you're super well versed. I know we spoke about you being on a podcast like a million times before. I could just tell by the way that you said that you've done this before. So I felt like that's great information, but I feel like we're missing maybe some basic information, which I think maybe the audience could really use to help them connect to this podcast. So what is semen retention? What is the process of semen retention? Is it just holding your semen as a man? And that's it. So like what is semen retention? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at a basics, it's holding your semen, it's retaining it. But of course, unless you like, I know, if you hear that, even the first time I heard that, I'm like, what the,
Who can
why
do
the
that?
heck? Yeah, why would I even want to do that? You know what I mean? And a lot of guys will say that they're like, why would you even want to do that? This is the highest pleasure a man could feel. And from a material perspective, from a body perspective, I would largely say that that's true. Um, but once you understand that, again, we go back to what is the nature of something. So what is the nature of ejaculation? What's the purpose of it? Its purpose is to have babies. Now, as human beings, we don't just have intercourse or intimacy to have babies. We have it for all kinds of different reasons: intimacy, connection, love. Some people have it for power. Some people like the way that we're using our our sexual energy can be almost numerous to the amount of people there are on the planet. So once you understand the process of semen retention, it doesn't mean that you never ejaculate again, but what it means is that you start to bring consciousness around it. You don't do it compulsively, which starts to give you a certain level of mastery and control over your body and mind. So semen retention, really at the essence of its practice, is a practice of self-mastery. And self-mastery naturally leads to self-realization, or more and more subtle realizations about what is actually controlling you, what is controlling your mind. So to me, it's a practice of freedom. Ultimately, at its core, it's about self mastery, and self mastery is about freedom. Am I a slave to the hub? Am I a slave to, every chick that bends over at the gym? Am I a slave to my compulses and my impulses? Or do I have control over my body, my mind? And once you have control over your body and mind, you can direct it into the things that are important to you, your finances, your relationship, your careers, your spiritual life. And so that's real essence of it. And then, I mean, do you want me to talk about like the biological process of semen retention, what actually happens, or?
I do. I would
Okay.
like you to go into it, but I have some questions before we get this. So you said it helps you to master yourself. Like how does it do that? How is just holding in your semen helping you to master who you are? Because on like just a physiological level, semen is just a fluid of the body. So how is that helping any of us to become better at being ourselves?
Sure. So, sexual energy is at a biological level is driving a lot of our activities. It is a base motivator. So on the bodily level, we have some base motivators, one of them being sex, so reproduction, another one being eating, right? So they're generally survival mechanisms. Sleep is another one. um, so these base desires largely control us, and they control the way that we show up in life, or our decision making process. What happens is when you start to go above the base desires, so in this case, by retaining your semen, what you're essentially doing is you're training yourself to go above your base desires and say, all right, my body is pushing me to ejaculate for the purpose of reproduction, but I'm gonna retain that. I'm gonna put some discipline around that. I'm going to sacrifice the ejaculation for a higher purpose, which is to then develop a strong willpower. And any man knows, if like for example, for me, I don't know, man, I started jerking off when I was like 9, 10 years old type of thing, right? Like,
Yeah,
like
started
just
early, man.
oh, yeah, just get at it
Started
young,
early.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Start young, right? You know? And it pretty much was like a daily habit, and for a lot of guys, that's the truth, right? And that's without the porn culture we live in now. Now add pornography into this scenario, and high definition phones, and, and quick access to the most hardcore things on the internet. The situation is just getting escalating out of control, where guys are becoming addicted to this, and it's
Mm.
becoming an addiction. And so what happens is when you practice retention, you start to recognize, wait a sec, I'm just doing this compulsively, or I'm doing this because I have some deeper emotional issues. Like I feel lonely, I feel disconnected, I feel
I feel
unsatisfied.
insecure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm feeling
I know that
insecure.
I know that was the main thing with me through growing up. So
Mm,
I never knew about it till about grade 7. So I think I was like 13, turning 14. I'm not too sure. And yeah, a friend told me about it. I won't go into details, but anyway. And yeah, and I was just from that point on, I just found it a quick, easy way instead of, approaching the girls that I liked and stuff like that. I would rather just, to be honest, I would just think about it and just be like, okay, boom. And now I don't need to.
that's right.
Little did I realize that was really hampering my ability to be confident around women and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
I only realized that way later on. I mean, like most men, years of doing it and not actually doing what I should be doing, was actually having the confidence to go and speak to people and get out there and, embrace that side of myself. I would rather just sit in my room and just think about it all the time.
Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
biggest benefits we see to men who start practicing alchemy as we teach it in semen retention is their social anxiety reduces and their social life increases.
Increases. Yeah,
Because
yeah.
again, your body, you have to understand, life wants you to be successful. It wants you to be good at what you're doing. It wants you to go and meet a partner and have babies and create a
Friends and
family.
create a
It's
circle and
yeah, and create a
expand
circle.
and yeah,
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 it
yeah.
wants you to do those
Yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah.
But what you're doing is when you're overriding it through masturbation, when you're overriding it through pornography use, what you're doing is you're taking all of that natural drive to push you out of your comfort zone and develop those skills and
Mm,
subdue it. And that's why so many people today are facing high levels of anxiety. But again, one of the first things, like we have so many students have come through, and one of the first things they say is, man, like I actually want to go talk to people. I have this urge to get out there, to meet new people, friends. Like, yeah, because your body is pushing you to do that. That's a natural social, it's a natural part of your social evolution. So semen retention helps you master yourself as the original question, because you basically uh, are no longer being compulsive. And then because these natural drivers start turning on, which you may not have ever experienced, like you said, most of us start masturbating at such a young age that we don't even know what we're like if we don't masturbate. And then all of a sudden, guys are like, oh my gosh, I have all this drive. I have all this energy. I want to talk to people. You know, I'm no longer interested in these kind of lower pleasures of pornography and these type of things. Now
and
I'm
wasting my
interested in,
time and being
yeah,
depressed and being sad. And
that's right.
that's something that I had to come to terms with, is that I had to realize that the version of myself that I created through the process of, watching porn and masturbating for many, many years, that wasn't actually who I was. And I had to come back, like I had to jump back a few years to like teach that version of myself how to be someone different, you know? Because
Yeah.
that part of me that never got out there at a young age, and never, or that stopped going out there and stopped evolving myself socially to certain extents. I had to like walk back there and hold that version of myself's hand and say, like, come now, let's go,
Yeah.
let's get out there. Let's actually go and, create something for ourselves.
What's really interesting, it brings up this point, and this isn't just true for masturbation, but it's true for generally addiction overall, is
Mhm.
wherever the addiction lives is where the growth stopped. So if the addiction, let's say, started at, let's say, 16, then in some ways you're still operating as a 16-year-old in mental development.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And so again, going back to semen retention for men, what happens is not only does it help you with your masturbation and that piece, but because you are developing such strong willpower, and specifically with the practice of alchemy coupled with semen retention, you're also going to balance your energies, open up your, what you
Mhm.
start to do is you break other addictions as well. Next thing you know, like for me, my biggest vice has been weed. That's definitely been my crux, right? And what happens with, as I started practicing semen retention and alchemy, I've been able to eliminate that as an addiction in my life. And then boom, that just exploded me to a whole new capacity of what I can contain in my body, meaning energy, focus. And that's really what launched me into new levels of success. See, most people want a successful life in their health, their finances, their spiritual life, in all areas. Who doesn't, right? It's a natural desire, right? So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be successful. It's a natural desire that the ant wants to be successful at what it does. The tree wants to be successful at it does. And the human being wants to be successful at what it does. Um, but what really stops us is these vices and addictions. And oftentimes we develop them at young ages and don't realize that actually we've also psychologically hindered ourselves from developing, higher thought process and essentially maturing in a way to become a man. And this is one of the biggest reasons that men are finding themselves feeling negative, depressed. It's not because of anything other than you stopped growing, most likely through ignorance, just unknowingly. Like,
Mm.
I'm blessed that I don't have some trauma in my life where I'm like, this happened and that definitely No, it was by my own ignorance, starting to smoke
Mm,
weed, starting to masturbate, watching porn, getting into party culture, and not recognizing that that whole lifestyle was actually stopping me from growing as a man and being more and more responsible. And the more responsible you are, the more free you are and the more successful you'll be.
I like it. And I have some things I want to say about that. Before I get there, I was just curious about like, so you're the head of the Semen Retention Army, or now the Powerhouse Man Group. But how did you get there? Like, how did you become who you are today? Where did you start, or why did you start? Like, what was that click for you that was like, damn, like something needs to change here? Yeah, and then what roads did you take? Did you try other things first, and then were you like, nah, that doesn't work. I tried this one and tried that one, and then eventually you found this, and then you're like, okay, let's go with this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lifetime of discovery, right? So I'll give you the Cole's Notes version of the journey, but so uh, basically through business. So I started my first company, which was called My Cleaning Guy. It was a carpet cleaning company,
Hello.
and yeah, that was my first business.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I bought a truck. I got a loan for about 30 grand. I bought a truck and some cleaning equipment and went out and started wanting to get cleaning clients. And I recognized I don't know how to do this and I'm scared shitless to sell. I'm scared to talk about what I do. I'm scared to walk into companies and be like, "Hey, I can clean your carpets. Can I give you a quote?" Right?
Sure.
And so because I was struggling to get out there, but I knew I had to get out there and talk to people to do this, I hired a business coach. And the business coach ended up being much more than a business coach. She ended up being like sort of like a life coach and mentor. She introduced me, actually, the very first program I took was called Little Voice Mastery, 21 techniques to reprogram the little voice, how to win the war between your ears. And it made such an impact on my life, recognizing how my thoughts were affecting my actions. And if you can control your mind, you could control your actions, and you could start to direct. If you can shift the way you think about something, you shift the actions you take. And if you shift the actions you take, you shift the results. And
Mm,
that there are universal laws and principles that are in your favor. You have to know how to use the law, like a good lawyer can use the law to advance himself. And so that was the beginning of my journey. And we were having this coaching session and we were making all these plans about franchising this cleaning company, which at the time was called My Cleaning Guy. And we were going to sell franchises and I was going to become the big cleaning mogul. And I thought to myself,
mm.
I definitely don't want to do that for the rest of
Yeah.
my life. I have no
Cleaning
passion
carpets.
around, yeah, cleaning carpets.
Sure.
It's great for business. And if you're just a business person, great. But I felt something deeper. And I said to my coach, I don't want to do this. She's
Mm,
like, what? We've been working at this for like a year. I said, yeah, I don't want to do this. I said, I don't want to take this any further. So what do you want to do? I looked at her and I said, I want to do what you do. I want to help people. Because I felt so much gratitude to her that I'm like, you haven't just taught me business skills. Yeah, it started that way, but my whole life is better now. My relationships are better now. My health is better now. I understand myself at a deeper level now. I want to give people what you've given me. And so that launched me into becoming a coach and trainer. And I've spent close to a decade helping mainly wellness entrepreneurs and spiritually based entrepreneurs generate sales. And I still do that to this day. I help many people in their business. And then about and then through my own spiritual process, so I started studying, just I became a seeker, if you will. And I just started studying, and I've spent time in different religious groups, Shambhala Buddhists. I was born Catholic. I started studying things like Reiki, crystals, tarot cards, anything and everything under the sun to do with spirituality and astrology and all of these things I was studying and learning and growing. And then I had this tremendous awakening experience after seeing a native shaman. And after this shaman experience, I was just in bliss. And I was like, and I just was living like, I honestly, like I felt like a Buddha in a way, like I'm not, but I felt like that kind of just like everything is good and I'm good. And that lasted for about 6 months. But then I noticed the old habits came back and I recognized I need a practice. I need something that's going to keep elevating me. And that's actually when a book came into my life that changed my life forever. And it's known as the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita came into my life, and I read the Bhagavad Gita, and I put down the Bhagavad Gita and said, okay, that makes sense to me. And so and I still seek. I'm actually doing this thing where I'm reading, like right now, I'm reading the Quran. I'm reading all the scriptures of the world. I
Mm,
still at heart am like a seeker, and I don't think that will ever end. I don't ever want to
mm,
stop seeking and
mm,
challenging my beliefs and challenging my knowledges. So I enjoy the seeking process. But the Bhagavad Gita really explained a lot of things to me. It also helped me like get closer to my roots is Christianity, and and understand Jesus better. And then through the devotees of Krishna, there was this heavy emphasis on renunciation, on brahmachari. And that was like kind of confronting for me, right? Like, oh, okay. But I'm like married 15 years in a very Western styled, like kind of relationship, and I didn't want to give up that connection I have with my wife. Like I don't, and so that became a conflict in my own spiritual journey.
mm,
And so that's where I started seeking, as I do. What are other thoughts? What are schools of thoughts around this? Is there a wider perspective? And I learned that there is, right from the Vedic knowledge as well as the Taoist knowledge. And actually, all esoteric knowledge has some form of alchemy as part of it. And I recognized and that's when I learned. I met a teacher, and that teacher was teaching something called sexual kung fu, discipline around sexuality and alchemy. And I started to learn the principles of alchemy and sexual alchemy, which was to learn how to still have sex, experience sex at a higher level, change your relationship with sex, and evolve it from lust to love making, to be able to experience non-ejaculatory sex, to be and to use sex and incorporate it as part of the spiritual journey instead of seeing it as a separate thing, an enemy of the spiritual journey. You now begin to incorporate it and alchemize it and say, this is part of me. This is part of the human experience. How do I bring this in and actually work with this and be real about where I'm at? Because I'm not a monk, I'm not a brahmachari, but I practice semen retention. I practice alchemy. And that just worked wonderfully. And I think for the first time, like, recording this, I'm 38 right now. Started practicing this maybe around 33, 34. And I was already having some success, but I was capping. And that's also what I was looking for. Like, I'm like, why
mm,
can't I break through to the next level? Like, I'm
mm,
doing all the right things. And I knew, based upon all my readings and everything that I've learned about frequencies and vibrations, I knew it was a vibration thing. I'm like, it's not what I'm doing, it's who I'm being. I know
mm,
it, but I couldn't grasp what it was. And then I started practicing semen retention, and it was like, oh, that's what this is. And that was the catalyst. I literally stopped my business of helping people generate sales for a little bit of time. I quit everything. I shut it down. I got a corporate job, which I absolutely hated. And I said, I will be out of there in 12 months. I was out of there in 11. And I said, I'm going to do this for 1 year to make a shift and
yeah.
reposition and rebrand myself. And I'm going to teach people sexual alchemy, and I'm going to still help entrepreneurs and still build businesses and all, because all of that's part of it. But there was nothing more powerful for me in my journey so far than learning how to practice semen retention, circulate that energy, and use it consciously. I went from struggling to make 60, 70,000 a year to a multiple six-figure business in 3 years. I went from, like, what we know we're doing, I'm on my health journey and losing weight, right? But I went from really just carrying tons of body fat over my entire, 20s in life and overeating to now, getting into the best shape of my life. My connection with my wife is at a deeper level. And semen retention is super confronting, because
Mm,
what happens is when you practice semen retention, it brings up what is dormant in your unconscious. It brings it up to your consciousness. You become very aware of where like for me, just like how lusty I was, how much I was seeking pleasure, 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 pleasure through food, through sex, through porn, through drugs. And it was really confronting. But again, these processes of alchemy, they help you move it and alchemize it. And so that was the catalyst. The catalyst was me looking to better myself. I mean, there was many, again, I've had a big journey like everybody in life. I don't nobody I think is unique in that. We all are on this journey of life. And
Mm.
but those were some key moments or points that really influenced me into what I do now. And I feel so good about what I do. Like, I know that this is what I do for a living. This is my mission. This is what I'm here to do. And it feels so good to know your purpose, if you want to call it that, to know your role to play. And my role to play is to be a teacher of alchemy and help men transmute this energy so they can better their lives. And I've never been at like peace the way I am today of like, this is what I do and I'm good. I'm content.
So like what is one of the struggles that you have transmuted in yourself that I mean you don't have to talk about the intimate ones that are you're
No, I
still
don't mind.
saying,
Yeah.
but yeah, what's one of the struggles that you've looked at and then you're like, damn, like that needs to change. I mean,
Oh my gosh, so many, but let's just go with some like really tangible ones, right? I don't watch porn anymore. I
mm,
have no taste for porn. Like it's just like it's kind of like disgusting to me.
mm,
And I've had to also look at my own lust. And I'm not saying I'm lust free. I have lust in me, but I've been able to use that lust and alchemize it to higher purposes instead of being lusty for some cheap pleasure. I've been able to reduce, and I say that hesitantly because, that temptation of marijuana is still in my life. It's still there in my sphere,
mm.
but I've been able to really bring that.
What is the link? What is the link between you and the marijuana? What is because I in my opinion, so I do Reiki and stuff. So
Mm,
I'm always looking at the deeper underlying connection between the person and the behavior. So for me, like when I used to smoke cigarettes, I mean I used to smoke weed as well, but cigarettes were more of an addiction for me than weed was. And
okay.
I came to this point of realizing that smoking to me, and I've said this in a previous podcast, but smoking to me is a sign that I don't love myself, nor do I respect myself. And so when
Mm,
that clicked in my mind, I that's what helped me to overcome it. I found that I really want to be a man that respects myself because if I don't, then other people are not going to respect me either, or the people that matter won't respect me either. And if I'm not putting in the work, then how are other people gonna, how
sure.
am I going to be of someone worth of value? And I'm not saying I'm perfect and I have everything under control. I still have a lot of things I work on. And I mean, yeah. And so what do you think is that underlying connection
I
between
I think I think it's a self-identity thing, right? Like, I've been
uh,
smoking weed since such a young age that it just lives as an identity. It's almost like a piece of me dying, like, "Oh,
mm,
like, I don't do that anymore." But so I think that it's a self-identity, just a really, like, an embedded, self-identity. I also think I used it as a way to connect with people, so I think that there's this part of me that says, "Well, like, and again, it's because I don't smoke weed, but around certain people, I'll be like, okay, yeah, let's
tempted.
smoke a
Yeah, yeah,
joint together because
yeah.
really I want to connect with you. And that's the medium in which we connected. Right. And I almost feel like if I don't, I can't connect with them because I'm like, what are we doing here? Right.
What are we
So
doing?
yeah, what
Who
are we doing?
are you without the weed?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, right? Yeah, and so I
Yeah.
think there's a few people in my life that and that's all it really is. I think it comes down to I appreciate you challenging me that and that's good coaching, right? That's what we do as coaches. We say, well, what is the deeper issue? And I think the
Mm,
deeper issue is feeling like if I don't do this around certain people, I'll lose my connection with them. I won't be able to
uh,
relate to them. And I think that's where it really comes from.
it's a
It's almost a way for me, for certain people to
to
share
feel
some moments
comfortable.
with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and not to feel comfortable. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I'm this is all I'm gonna say is, but like, if the people can't appreciate you without the external things, then
Yeah.
should
I
be
don't think it has
recognized.
anything to do with them. I don't think that they don't appreciate me. I think it's the other way around. I
Uh,
don't appreciate them. I don't I judge them harshly, and I think it's I actually had I don't think it has anything to do with them. I think it's internal. It's the way it's my own insecurity about it. Like, and I
mm,
feel like sometimes my presence, because I do live a very clean life and I do hold high standards and such, I feel like sometimes my presence around certain people makes them uncomfortable. But again,
mm.
it's just my uncomfortability, rather than
It's
projecting it on
funny.
them.
It's funny you say that because I find that when I go, the longer I retain for, the more powerful I feel. But I also get very much in my own head, So I start to think that I'm better than other people, and I've noticed it in
Yeah.
myself, and I have to bring myself down because I'm just because I can retain my semen doesn't mean I'm better than anybody else,
I just read this thing, just this morning that was talking directly about this idea that how, like, this idea of maybe spiritual superiority, right? This, like, "Oh, I retain and I'm so
Yeah,
clean
yeah.
and I'm
I
so."
can meditate.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah, ooh, I can, like, look how many rounds I can chant and all
Yeah.
this, but then what we do is we end up putting ourselves above, and then we end up becoming more disconnected. We're actually regressing in the illusion of progressing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Right? And so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
have to
yeah.
be very conscious and careful of that and course correct. And that's why one of the things, it's like I always like to bring it back to me 100. I teach this in as part of our group. 100% responsibility. 100%, like, what is my part to play in that? So it's like, well, it's not really that it's not it, do I is it that I make other people uncomfortable? It's just that I'm just uncomfortable, or I
Mm,
haven't settled into who I am fully, right? So, I think and it might be a little bit of both, but definitely we should always be careful and be conscious of that superiority complex of, like, I'm living a certain way, or I've reached certain levels of, let's say, self mastery as an example, to now think we're better than others. And I think it's always good to remind ourselves overall, and I do this with myself, is say, you're a human, I'm a human, they're a human, we're all
let's
on this
remember
planet,
that.
so we're all here for a reason. And it's also important that we don't put people up on, like, too high of pedestals
Pedestals, yeah,
either, right?
sure.
Because
Sure,
then in a way we try to be on that pedestal ourselves.
yeah.
So it's
Mm,
like reflective, right? If we imagine someone, and that's one of the, I don't like sometimes, and this is more like, depending on the culture. This is more I find with, like, the Indian culture. Guys will send me messages and be like, "Oh, Guruji," or they call me these sort of names, and I'm always like reply like, "Hey, bro."
hey, bro.
Hey, bro.
What's
Right?
happening, man? Yeah.
Yeah, what's going down? And that's pretty much to cut that, like, putting me up on a pedestal.
Mm,
It's like I'm not, like, that's why I'm very open about my journey. I what I
mm.
don't want to be perceived as, like a guru, or like, yes, I am a teacher. In one hand, I'm a teacher for sure. I accept that role in this life. What I'm doing, I'm teaching. So in one sense, I am, but not like that idea of, like, you're gonna come and you're gonna
It's
bow to
not like
me,
your
or
whole it's not like your whole life. It shouldn't be one's
it's not
whole
my
identity.
yeah, it's not my
Yeah, yeah,
whole
yeah. It's an
identity. I'm
aspect of, because
yeah,
ultimately we're all needing to be different things in different places. Like I'm a teacher when you come to the group and you're teaching us,
yeah.
or anybody that comes to you, but at home, you're a husband, you're not a teacher anymore. There's no ways
No,
that you're now
yeah,
staying in that same mind frame or mindset. And I mean, when you're meeting people out there and you're just like there, you're just a guy, you're a friend,
yeah,
and like
totally,
so on and so forth.
yeah.
And like there
And
needs to be that flexibility in one's
yeah, that's right. We have to
mental
recognize that
content.
we get to play certain roles with certain people, but they're
Mm,
not fixed, right?
mm,
So in one sense, I am a teacher to my students, to the guys that I'm working with, and for other people, I'm their son and their son-in-law, and I get to play that role, right? I get to be, whatever that requires. Often it means shutting up and listening and just being respectful, and not, I'm not here to teach you life lessons, right? And when I'm with friends, we're just hanging out outside of that, like, it's just we're friends, that type of thing. It's actually one of the things I've learned in myself too, is I don't generally coach unless I'm asked, or that relationship has been established, only because it's like I'm not a teacher to everyone. I'm a teacher to those who allow me to be a teacher to them.
yeah. And I mean, some people will come for a longer time, and some people just
Yep.
want help with something specific, and then the teaching's done, and it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Well,
I've
now we're
taught you
back to
what I
normal.
know. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right, back to
yeah, yeah,
normal,
good.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's even with, like, the guys, like, as you know, I try as best to just, like I try to keep the relationship always on a level of, like, friendship. It's also the type of rasa that I have with God, or the type of relationship that I've enjoyed with God is very friendship. So,
Mm,
overall, I just feel like my overall relationship style is very much at the level of friend, and recognizing that like, again, I don't want to be perceived or put up on a pedestal also, which is like is because then it sets the people up for unrealistic expectations too, right? It sets people up for like, oh
and
my
then
god,
they meet
Nicola
you.
smoked a joint,
Yeah,
he's ruined my whole spiritual life. I was like, whoa, 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 I never told I'm like, I'm not that guy, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah,
so, like, it's
yeah.
like, hey, I'm very much human like you are. And and all that type of thing. So I think over time, there was a few years where I did try to play into that role, where I tried to be the guru kind, and I was like, and position.
Naturally, you're like, ooh,
Yeah, yeah. And I recognized that there was a part of it that seemed really inauthentic, and that's why I stepped down from playing that role and being that, and being involved in like in any faith-based community as a guru type, or leading a
Mm.
center, or leading some spiritual. I was like, no, I'm not there. That's not true. That's it. And there's an inauthenticity that was feeling within myself while I was doing that. And it's funny. So in a way, you can say that I think outwardly it appears that I've regressed, but in my heart, I feel I progressed by
Trigger.
stepping down
But
and not
that
doing that.
that's like the precept, or what's the word? Like when before
Percent.
something happens.
Yeah. The
Anyway,
precept.
the the word.
I
The
think
pre
that's the word, yeah.
Anyway, that word, that's like
Scholars are we.
the step before something bigger happens. It's like, I was just thinking
Mm,
as you were saying all of that, how much retaining my semen and being on a spiritual path has really brought me to the space of like, I need to be really humble, you know. I think
yeah,
that's the main thing that I keep coming to, the main point I keep coming to as a man. It doesn't mean being authoritarian. It doesn't mean being a leader. It doesn't mean being, the boss, the big guy, the guy who can make decisions and make directions, or be good at this or be good. Like, the main thing for me is that I just need to be humble. It doesn't mean I'm not good at things. Like, for what you
yeah,
were saying, like, you don't want to be seen a certain way, but at some point, God has different plans for us, so we may need to be that.
that's
But
right.
as long as the humility is there with it, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, you
otherwise
kind
it
of
could become like
appreciate.
it can become a very sharp blade if you go into a
Oh,
space
yeah.
without that humility. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that you can appreciate that God has allowed you a certain role to play,
Yeah.
and you can be very grateful,
Be
like,
grateful.
"Really? You're
Yeah.
letting me," you're like,
Yeah,
"Are you
yeah. Well,
sure
thank
that"
you.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know why you're letting me do it, but cool.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do
yeah,
my best,
sure. I think the feeling of feeling unqualified is always
Yeah.
good for us. Like, I don't know that I'm really qualified to do this, but at the same time, one of my mentors said to me, "Humble is truthfulness." It's
Hmm.
being truthful, like, radically truthful. It's like, all right, I do, again, and this is in alchemy, we call it like the law of polarity, or like the pendulum swings, that that so this is in the material world, everything is dual. So in one sense, like, I can see that I am a teacher, and that's what I do. It's very practical, like because I literally run a school. I teach
Yeah, yeah,
alchemy.
yeah.
I'm a teacher, right? At a
Mm.
very practical level, I'm a teacher. And in another sense, I don't see myself that way because it's both. So it's always you know oneness and separation at the same time, or unity and diversity, or impersonal and personalism. All It's always the combination of both at the same time. So in one sense, it's like being grateful for whatever role that we've been given: a father, a teacher, a mechanic, whatever material roles that you may get to play. It's being, wow, I get to do this in this life, I get to actually experience this. Wow. And at the same time, recognizing that you're none of those things, that you are ultimately spirit,
A
soul, your
servant, right?
consciousness. You're a
Yeah.
servant. Yeah. You're
Yeah,
just
yeah,
there to play. You're a good steward of a certain
yeah.
information. And that's part of my morning affirmations. I literally say, thank you, God. I worship you, O Lord, the one, the only, the omniscient, the omnipresent God. I want to thank you so much that you've brought these principles of alchemy into my life, and that I get to go and steward it and teach it to men all around the world. It's how I start off my morning affirmations, by acknowledging that this is God's gift
Mm,
to
mm, mm.
me, but not really. It's just through this thing body
Yeah,
that we
he's
get
just
to bring it.
allowing you. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he's just
allowing you.
allowing me,
He's
and he could
allowing
take
you.
that away. And I promise you, if I misuse it, I know he will chop that down quickly. Yeah.
But that's the thing with having like a position of any sort, is that if you're not acting right, it's gonna come back to you in some way or another. People
Yeah.
don't realize that. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
why when
Yeah.
I see people, I mean, I see it in myself. I mean, I'm really nowhere near perfect, so I see my own shortcomings a lot. And um, but I see it in people who have stepped into positions, like particularly men who are supposed to be leaders, and then they've just acted not in a cohesive way. They've done some things which are really not positive behaviors, and I've seen it come back and bite those men in the ass. And it's a good thing to remember as I remind myself, as I step up into whatever role I need to play in this world, that you know I need to be mindful of that. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to be aware of that, and just remind myself that, you know, it's a gift. It's a
It's a gift.
gift. This is a gift, and it can be taken away just like that. And everything can be ruined just like that at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so the law of polarity also, like, will state, like, that the higher the rise, the higher the fall, right? So it's the pendulum, as the pendulum
As it
swings to the
swings,
left, it
yeah,
equally
exactly.
swings to the
Swings
right.
to the right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So once we understand that, we recognize if we've been given some position of leadership, and as men, I assert that men are naturally in a position of leadership at some degree and level.
Mm,
Um, that we are also held to a higher standard. We're held to be responsible with how we're leading our families and our children and our communities and businesses and the organizations that we may be involved with, or the things that we're involved with. And so I think it's important to be responsible. And I love what you said about masculinity. Yes, this, in the world of, let's say, masculinity, there's this kind of idea of, like, you're always the front man, I'm like, no, that's not leadership. That's not necessarily masculinity, but it's more like having the wisdom to know when to speak,
mm.
when to be assertive, when
When to keep
to,
quiet. Yeah.
and then when to, right, be quiet, and when to allow others to make the decisions. And ultimately, it's that idea of, like, servant leadership. I like in the Bible,
Mhm.
Jesus has a specific line that says, in the book of Mark, he says, he who comes first comes last and is servant to all. And I just really like that line. He who comes first comes last and is servant to all. Meaning, and and we know other spiritual leaders. For example, Srila Prabhupada was a servant to the people, that he was the leader, but it's very clear that he was serving everybody. And I feel like very big, in all, just whatever labels people want to give themselves, that quality of servant leadership is there in men who are really rising up to big levels. See, big CEOs. I've coached, very, very successful men and CEOs, and one of the things that allow them to stay as big CEOs is actually how humble they are, how they keep learning, how they're always looking out for the benefit of their people. And we can see that the CEOs, the leaders, politicians, and such, that lose that spirit, they become like pirates. They start to exploit their people. They've ruined their
Become
companies. They've
greedy.
ruined
Yeah, yeah.
nations. They
Getting,
rob their people.
I
Yeah.
like to think of it as like you get high off your own supply. So
Right.
now
Yeah. Yeah.
you're using all the resources you've built up, and that comes in the form of people that are looking up to you, people you're
Yes.
leading. Then you start using them as opposed to being abundant. You start using too much of your own supply. And
Yeah. Love that.
yeah, there was a point I wanted to bring up with that, but it left my mind. Let's see, I wrote it down here. Uh, yeah, I guess just yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get high of our own supply.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No,
Don't get high on your own supply. I think it's one of the 10 crack commandments from Notorious B.I.G.
It's a good cracker moment. Like don't use it to create abundance around oneself. And yeah, I think that's the point that I was trying to get to, was that I think that's a part of how I see myself growing at the moment, is that as I'm doing things, the positive things that I'm doing, like I'm really succeeding in some ways, but then the pendulum, as we were talking about before, the balance comes in, and I really need to acknowledge that I'm still such a learner in so many areas. Like just because I'm excelling maybe in a few areas or one area or whatever, doesn't make me the do all and end all in every other area of my life, because
Yeah.
I'm not. You know, I
Well,
realize I like to think of it in terms of like jiu-jitsu. I'm like a
yeah,
white belt in a lot of areas of my life, and I have to acknowledge that
right.
and just be like, okay, I'm still learning here. I'm good in that area, but in this area,
Yeah. And I think it's important, like, the analogy of, like, athletes come up, like, for
mm,
example, like, let's say somebody can throw a football really well, and they've got all this fame, and you got a
mm,
Tom Brady type who's just like, da, da, da. But then what ends up happening is people start to look at them almost as infallible, like, "Well, you're a top athlete, so what are your political views? Or what are your religious views?" And
you
you're
should
like,
run for president.
yeah, you should run for
No,
president. It's like, whoa,
no,
whoa, 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 whoa. Like he can throw a football like nobody's business, but does that mean he's qualified now to create political policy or to, right? It's like,
to govern people, like
to
no,
govern
that
people. Yeah, yeah.
doesn't.
It's like, and again, yes, so I think we should understand that we're all given gifts and skills, and we can be, let's say, really excelling in a certain aspect of our life, but struggling in another simultaneously.
Mm,
And
mm,
actually, that's also part of the alchemy principles. Is that generally there is some. The example is that, for example, the rich man has what is it? The rich man can afford all the pleasures of the table, so all the best foods um, that the poor man wishes he could enjoy, but the rich man can't enjoy it because he doesn't have the appetite for it. And then the poor man wants all the pleasures of the table, but can't get it because he doesn't have the resources for it, right? So it's again this balance, and it's understanding this polarity, and it's also understanding that anything attained is something sacrificed. The law of exchange, right? It's like, for example, as I help men grow their businesses, as an example, that's a sacrifice to grow a business. Like, it really is. Like, you're gonna sacrifice hours, you're gonna put in hard work. It's not forever, but you might sacrifice 3 to 5 years of your life to build up something really significantly big that pays you more than most people might ever earn.
mm.
But you've also sacrificed a lot there. You've sacrificed family time. You've sacrificed, different
Your
aspects of,
time. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
your time. You've
yeah, yeah.
you've given up a lot of other things. So I think, and there's no wrong or right. That's why I think everybody has to decide what makes sense for them. What do they really want, as opposed to what society's telling you want, right?
Mm,
And know your nature. Are you willing? Is that sacrifice worth it to you? And it may not be, and it's okay to be like, no, it's, for me, that's not worth it. And for other people, be like, no, it's totally worth it. And I think that's where we each, individually have to figure out where does that pendulum swing for us? What are we willing to sacrifice? How much value do we put on something or not?
mm. And yeah, I like what you were saying, and that's I think that's definitely from my side of things. Like becoming a man is so much more complex than I realized, you know.
I know,
And
totally. Yeah.
I didn't realize, but at the same time, I think that it's definitely, as you were saying, the responsibility of being a man, and that the weight that's put on my shoulders is definitely not something that I would ever want to give up, even though it can be quite hard sometimes. Or like, I don't know, I haven't experienced that much, but I've experienced enough to bring me to where I am right now. And I just feel like it's just supposed to be that way, you know? Either there's no other way that it could be. I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. And I only realized that through me actually being responsible with my own energy at the end of the day, and realizing that, I need to be not need to be, but I can be better and how do I better myself? And then linking with you, linking with the temple, linking with becoming a monk and all of that stuff, that showed me the way forward, in a lot of ways. And then things didn't become easier. Like in no way did my life become easier. It actually became more challenging, but the challenge, that weight on my shoulders, has made me a lot stronger. And even though it's been really tough sometimes, and it's probably going to be tough in the future, like the weight of that, the weight of being a man, the weight of being responsible, I don't think I would ever want to trade it for anything else, because there's such a deep gratitude that comes with it as well, at least from my side.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think again, it's kind of like I like the analogy of like resistance training, right?
Mm,
And it's like, I want to grow bigger muscles. Great. So what's the first thing that you need to do is you need to start to lift bigger weight. So the more that you ask for in life, the more weight you'll have to lift. And the challenges are, again, the law of duality, right? Everything has its polar opposite in this world. So meaning heads and tails are the same coin, just on different degrees. So what we call challenge is the bigger the challenge, the bigger the opportunity. It's to the degree is the same, right? So the question is, do we see it as a challenge and then we crumble under that challenge, or do we see it as an opportunity? I like you're sitting there and you're at the bottom of Mount Everest, and you look up and you're like, "Oh my goodness. Okay. That's a huge challenge. I'm done. I'm never climbing Mount Everest. I'm quit." Which is actually what
even
most
before
people
you
do.
started. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
even before you started,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or you look up and another person standing right will look up at Mount Everest and go, "What an opportunity. I
Mm,
get to climb that and suffer that entire journey." But when they get to the top, the again, the pendulum swings to the degree of pain,
mm.
sacrifice we're willing to experience. The pendulum swings
With
to the
that
degree of
reward.
the pleasure or
Yeah,
reward.
yeah, yeah.
So the person at the bottom who decided not to take on the challenge that life was preventing them also only experiences a little bit of joy. That their view of
That's
the
right.
world is tiny.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But the person who's like, that's the challenge that's put in front of me, I am going to climb it. Well, once they do get to the top, and it's not like you wait to get to the top, as you're climbing, your view gets better and better. So
And
just
you get
as you,
better and better. You get stronger, and you feel
yeah,
like, yeah, yeah,
cool, cool,
Yeah,
cool. Then you're like, yeah, yeah, cool,
yeah.
cool, cool. And then guess what? By the time you climb to the top and you see the reward, you're like, this is amazing. But what do you start thinking of almost immediately? I wish there was a bigger mountain. Right?
Let's
How
do
many
it
more of
again.
these can I cut? Let's do it again. Yeah, right? It's like, so it's like that. So this is true in all planes of life. So the material plane, the mental plane, the spiritual plane, the law of polarity is there,
Mm.
right? Is that the more you push into your uncomfortability, and again, this is semen retention does this for men.
It
It
naturally, yeah, because you have that
naturally,
energy. It's
that's
like
right.
when I go for, like, if there's some phases where I just have so much energy and I have to do something with it. It's like I cannot
Mhm.
sit. If I sit, I'm just going to be anxious as hell. And I've been clicking into, because I have social anxiety. It's
Mm,
something I've always had. That was one of the reasons I got into like masturbation and porn way back when, is through my just developing social anxiety. And then that was my crutch for it, and then smoking
yeah,
weed, and then smoking cigarettes,
sure.
and it all led. But anyway, so the point was that if I sit and what I've been thinking about lately is that when I get anxious, I've been like, I need to make a decision right now. What do I need? And I need to do it. Instead of sitting here and thinking and then getting all like overthinking, and like I need something. So what do I need? And am I willing to take that step to go and do what I need to do in order for the anxiety to, because the anxiety, like anything, the emotion is just a secondary response to whatever the need is that's not being met at the end of the day. I mean, you
Yeah.
you have you teach in one of the courses, the Powerhouse Man Group, the hierarchy of needs, right? The
Yeah,
Maslow
Maslow's
hierarchy of
hierarchy.
needs.
Yep.
And that's a part of how I'm seeing my journey, is that it's a part of my growth is to understand what I need.
Yep.
And it's weird, because being a leader also means being a servant, but being a leader also means knowing when to put yourself first so that you can serve well. And a
Yeah.
part of doing that is understanding myself and my own needs, because if my if at least to some extent I don't meet my needs, then I'm going to be a super unhappy person. And
Yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of that idea of like, put your like if the plane is crashing, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. And I think that like what we can end up doing is see again, anything to taken to the extreme ends up becoming not beneficial, right? So for example, this idea of selflessness. So I live a selfless life, but we can also use that to spiritually bypass our own problems. I'm
Mm,
doing all this service. I have all these responsibilities, but I have this like thing, this addiction or this, and I'm using this to ignore that. Then this service is actually not beneficial. It's
it's just a
actually
scapegoat,
it's
yeah.
yeah, it's just another scapegoat.
And it's just
It's
also the intention behind it, you know? Because if I'm
100%.
not there for the sincere purpose of being there, then I'm there for another reason. So what's the point of being there? Even if I'm doing
Yeah,
the thing,
yeah,
the
that's right.
intention was way off. So it's like, you know?
Yeah, and the intention is really what I truly believe what is actually gets you the result, right? It's like that's why two people can do the exact same thing and get two different results. It's
Results, yeah.
because the energy behind it is different, the intention, right? The desire. So, for example, we can use being a servant as it's nice outwardly, right? Oh, look at all this service I'm doing. Look at all these things I'm helping so many people. But what I'm really doing is avoiding my own problems. Then actually your capacity to serve other people is limited anyways, because you can only bring someone to the point you're at, right? You
Mm,
can't bring someone further than where you're at. So you're in my opinion and perspective is that your number one job is always to increase your capacity, which means sometimes like drawing stronger boundaries about what you're saying yes to. Like one of the things I teach is simplify. Where can you? That's how I had to do that in my own life. Where can I simplify? Where do I need to step back and not take on more service so I can do this service at a higher level? Like this is all I do, man. My life is simple, right? Like now, I get
adjusting, readjusting.
totally adjusting, readjusting. My life is super simple. My mornings are about a spiritual practice.
Mm,
From 10 till 6 is about growing our movement as far as semen retention and alchemy and teaching these lessons and spreading the word about semen retention and why it works and helping men and masculinity. And then after 6 it's about chilling out, playing some games, spending time with Sarah, family, friends, those type of things, with moments of like spontaneous kind of gifts. Like next
mm,
weekend we're going to the MMA fight, my buddy, and we're going. There's a lot going on. Actually, simple doesn't mean boring. My
mm.
life is not boring at all. I actually really love my life. Like I enjoy my life, but it's simple, and it allows room for me to hone. And that's what I recognize. I was like, okay, if I really want to make an impact, I can't do a million things half-ass or half-heartedly. I need to do one thing and dedicate myself, commit myself to it and make it my mission and get so undeniably good and know it so well that it'll probably take me lifetimes to even like, to actually learn it all. Then I will do something really great. And that's what I've done over the last few years with this business. Is I dedicated myself and I just made a commitment to myself. I'm like, I'm going to be so undeniably good as a coach that I will be able to attract students from all around the world, because it'll be so undeniable that he is great at what he
Mm.
does and that it works and it's valuable. And so you build something of value. But to do that, I had to sacrifice other roles. Like I mentioned, I stepped back from, like spiritual, like leadership roles in different organizations, or presenting guru roles, or doing these things. I stepped back from all that. I stepped back from being involved with politics. I was, involved with politics for a number of years there. I stepped back. I gave that all up. I gave all that up to fully dedicate myself to this. And so I've like staked my claim, and it's scary to do that because
But
it's the FOMO.
it's also like that analogy of like if you pay attention to every dog that barks, you know, I mean, you can look at it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like if people are trying to get under your skin and you pay attention to every person that tries to get under your skin, you're going to be so distracted at the end of the day. If you pay attention to every pretty man, every pretty woman that's out there, you're going to have it's just so much unfocused energy. If you pay attention to every opportunity that comes your way, it's like you're scattering your energy where it could be used for a potent, more like laser beam mission, you know?
That's
So
right.
yeah, it's interesting. It's
And that's
interesting to
that's
learn to
also
say
the
no.
practice of semen retention, what it gives
Yeah.
guys. Because
Mm,
again, you're confronted with like all this energy, and then the practices of alchemy is like the analogy is like the sun, right? The sun shines, wide, and one sense it's giving life, but for the context of our analogy, it's not doing anything. We can't
mm,
set anything on fire with the sun, but if we take a magnifying glass and we concentrate that energy and focus it, we can light something on fire. We can, right? So same thing, you're taking all this energy, and
you're
now, and
putting it.
again, it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then like pillar 1 of the Powerhouse Man program is developing your vision, right?
Mm.
Now focus it like a laser and just penetrate it into that, and watch it take hold and take shape way quicker than you could even imagine, if you actually direct yourself. The challenge with it is letting go of all the stuff that's actually distracting you, and
And
the stuff that you
that you
think
think
you
is a
need to
part.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stuff you think you need
I'm
to
thinking
do.
of all the things I'm doing at the moment, and I'm just analyzing what do I need to let go of? Because
100%.
I'm one of those people. So I'm a typical Virgo. Like I look into
Okay.
astrology and I believe it is it's a positive thing to be aware of. And a Virgo, I'm a jack of all trades.
Okay.
That's my thing. But that's the thing is that I don't feel that my thing is to just be super good at one thing. I think my one thing is being good at many things. That's
Mm.
my one thing, you know? So
Yeah,
I'm looking at
interesting.
it in terms of like that. So I don't have to be the typical stereotypical person who is like, I'm just going to do business.
Right.
I mean, like as an example or whatever
Yeah,
the example,
yeah,
I'm just going to make ice cream, you know?
right.
My thing is being good at many things. Because if I wasn't putting my energy into many things, I would feel less of myself, you know, because I
Yeah.
have such a creative energy that I would feel bored if I didn't. And I was watching this TED talk. I think it was a TED talk. Anyway, this guy or this lady was talking about all the great people in the world. So all the great thinkers, Plato, whatever, Einstein, and they always had multiple projects going on that they would jump between when they hit like plateaus. And them jumping between their projects would often they would leave one project on the back burner, even though this was like super big for them. They realized I'm in a plateau. Let me jump to another project. Let me follow this train of thought. And then they would come back to that project, and then that project would take off again. Boom. But it's because they got new ideas or new ways of thinking because they left it alone for a bit and then they came back to it. And then boom. And then they realized that this project, even though it seemed big at the time, is not actually the thing that's big. It's now this project that's actually big because now I've done so much in this and this is taking off, and that one's not actually that important anymore, you know? And it's just like, oh, okay. But the point was what the person was trying to bring across is that they were always invested heavily into a few areas of life and a few talents or passions that they had. It was never just one passion. And yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, so I just
No, no,
strongly
no.
align with that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that because I found in my own journey just reflecting the same thing. So, for example, I have some like I'm renovating this building, right, that I'm living in. And it's just like kind of this thing, like it's like another project that's completely outside of what I do. There's a
Mm,
tie into it, but it's really outside of it. And it does. And I like that idea. I remember there's one guy that so there's a show on Netflix called Big Timber, and it was a guy who does logging out in BC,
yeah.
and he's one of the last family owned logging companies. Like he never sold to a big corp. He's doing it his way. Blah blah blah. Right. So it's a show about like him and his business and his shows. But one of the things I admired about him was how he had so many projects on the go, and then as soon as he had a block in one project, he's like, okay, well, we like for instance, he had to wait for a license for the government to continue to do
Yeah,
certain
yeah, yeah.
logging.
Just
So
jumped. Huh?
Yeah, so he had like 3 weeks where that all the equipment, everything's sitting there. But not instead of just sitting there and twiddling his thumbs, he's like, okay, he now takes his resources, his energy, and then he's like going and fixing a boat. And he's because
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
got another license to do logging in another area. So he takes this boat and he gets his crew and they rig this thing up. And then they're going and taking logs out from the beaches until that license comes in and then he's able to move forward, right? And I've learned in the business context to do that as well. Like
Mm.
I've learned over time that nothing really goes on the timeline I want it. Like I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this, this, and this over the next 3 weeks, and 3 months later, I'm like, okay, we're still need to do this,
Still,
this, and this.
still
Yeah,
need to do number one.
yeah, yeah, right,
Still
right,
busy
right,
on that one.
right. But it's not because things aren't moving forward. It's just
Yeah.
you hurry up and wait. You go as fast as nature will allow you to go,
Mm.
but you don't stay stagnant. You
Yeah.
don't just sit around. Then you go,
Yeah.
well, okay, great. And they do. They end up actually working out. And again, there's a bigger intelligence at play that's helping you. And it's to surrender to that. If there's a block, okay, it doesn't mean it might be blocked forever, but it might mean there needs to be something else that you're not seeing to happen and you need to drop that for a while. And so again, there's this element of trust and getting into the flow of life and just allowing your life to unfold without trying to control every circumstance and
Mm.
scenario and make it go exactly to your timeline. And to me, that's the balance of the masculine, feminine energies within us. So the masculine is penetrative, order, visionary, leader, decisive, right? But then it has to be mixed with the chaos, unpredictability of the feminine. And when we get too in our masculine, we can end up becoming
Rigid. Yeah.
rigid. Yeah. And then
Mm.
rigid means we'll break easily. We have
Mm.
to rest more. We're so rigid that everything, it just, our relationships, everything just, we can't go with anything. We're trying to control everything. And if
Mm.
we get too much into our feminine, nothing happens. We just become stagnant, lots of ideas, but no execution. And so again, that balance, is required for us to be able to move, to create, to regenerate. That's there physically. You need the masculine, feminine to create a baby, but you need the masculine, feminine to create a business. You need the masculine, feminine to create a movement. You need the masculine, feminine to create anything because that law of gender has to be there, has to be there for creation to happen.
Because that's the whole creation anyway. It's made up of
That's
uh,
right.
both energies, and
Yeah,
essentially all of us have both in, but given the different like circumstance, a certain body, you have a stronger designation for one energy than for the other,
that's right.
But ultimately at the end of the day, because that's the way nature's designed. I mean, that's why they are different genders, that's why, well, three genders in my opinion. People will disagree with me, but
What's the third? I just did a
where
video
where
saying there's
someone's in
two.
between. Yeah, where someone's in between, but they have like a penis and a vagina. It's like I
Oh,
forget the
okay.
name of it. Yeah, but there is that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
There is.
scientifically,
Yeah.
there is that.
Yeah,
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 yeah. There is. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
a
yeah. And so
small, it's a very small percentage, but
very
it is
rare.
that. Yeah, it's very
And
rare.
those
Yeah.
people were actually considered in the tribes way back in the day, like very holy people. Like they would often take on very like holy or spiritual roles in the communities, specifically in the Native American tribes. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, so the point that I was saying was that yeah, some people, I mean, given the certain designation, you have a bit more of a certain energy than the other, but at the end of the day, we're all different as well. So like
That's right.
your flavor of masculine energy is different to my flavor of masculine
That's
energy,
right.
but we're both still men. So we both have similar responsibilities in life, and we have to meet those responsibilities because we're men, you know?
Yeah, there's some things that are universal, and
Mhm.
so there's principle and then expression of the principle,
Yeah. And
right?
details. Yeah, yeah.
And
Details.
details of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And that's where, where we tend to argue or get like, caught up, right? It's like, well, what's the principle? The principle is that you're a man and you have certain responsibilities. Now, is everybody going to express? And this is why it's dangerous. Like it's dangerous, but even, some of the guys that I've worked with, I've had these conversations. They're like, well, like Andrew Tate says this. And I'm like, okay, but you're not Andrew Tate. Like, I'm
And
not Andrew
what
Tate.
is Andrew Tate also trying to achieve with his life? It's like
That's
You have to
right.
look at all of that as well. So like
Yeah,
some
you can't just
information is
say
great, but this
yeah.
the where he's going with his life, like, do you want that? Because if you follow what he says, that's where you're leading yourself,
Yeah.
basically.
And I
Yeah.
I think a guy like Tate, he's a great marketer. He knows how to polarize people. He knows exactly what he's doing, right? And so it's like you can't just buy into it. And maybe it works for him, but
Mm.
also like I actually there was a woman that was specifically talking about Tate, and she's like, Tate, he understands the principles. It's clear. Is it but he also, like, he's saying this to everybody. He's like, but a lot of men haven't earned, like, for example, let's just say women should be submissive to men as a principle, right? The feminine is submissive to the masculine. What she was saying is that is true, but that happens naturally if a man builds himself up. But if you're a man who hasn't built yourself up, if you can't pay your bills and you can't pay her bills and pay her mother's bills and you're not there yet, then she will not naturally submit to you, not because she doesn't love you or desire you, but because you haven't reached a certain affluence to be able to provide and protect at a certain level. But as soon as you do, naturally women would submit because that would be a natural order. So the wrong what is it? The right advice at the wrong time is still the wrong advice.
Advice. Yeah.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
It's like it's because, yeah, principally, we understand what he's saying, but you have to then go, does that really apply? Like, if you're sitting there and you're, overweight and you're playing video games all day long
And then you
and
start telling your wife, you must submit to me.
yeah, and you're telling your wife to
It's
be
never gonna
submissive.
work, bro.
You're like, "No, that's what's happening, right?"
Yeah.
That's what's happening is that guys are like, "Oh, yeah, she needs to submit to me, and she just." I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa,
But what are
whoa."
you doing, bro?
Yeah, dude, I
Where's your
remember
life? Where's your
yeah,
self-development at?
that's
Like,
it.
what are
Where are
you
you
doing to
at?
be a man? Yeah.
Yeah,
But
don't
but
ask
so
for women to
yeah.
submit to you. Become such a man where she would naturally want to support you.
But that doesn't mean, like, for me, like, I also I agree with what you're saying, and I think that it doesn't mean that you cannot be a man who's still in the process of becoming
That's right.
the man you're supposed to be, and still be in a relationship where your woman is supporting and being
Totally.
submissive. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think that someone who is healthy in their masculinity is also going to see that I don't have all the skills in the world.
Yeah.
I have certain things I'm really good at, and my partner, my woman, my wife, whatever the
Yeah.
situation is, they have skills, and I need to acknowledge those skills. I'm sure we
Totally.
had a conversation about this as well, but I mean, in a previous talk we had, but acknowledging that and being like, okay, cool, you take the
Yeah.
reins on this one. You're so
My
good at this. Like
Myself and
yeah,
Sarah, we call it the captain system.
the
So the
captains.
yeah, we call it the
Yeah,
captain system so that there's no power struggle within
sure.
the conversations about something. So for example, when it comes to the business, right? Because Sarah works in the business with me, right?
Mm.
I'm the captain, meaning I'm leading and I'm making the decisions and such. But that's also not true in certain aspects of the business. See, Sarah naturally brings beauty and she's so good at designing things and
But
graphics
you're
and
like the
things.
front man. You're the
But I'm
front
the
man.
front
Yeah,
man, yeah, of
yeah,
the
yeah.
business. She's supporting it. But so what we'll say is in an individual project, let's say, for example, where the furniture goes in the house as a very simple thing. Okay, who's captain? Sarah's captain. Okay, great. My job is then to support Sarah. Why would I? You don't trust me. You don't want me to be captain when it comes to like
And
designing
you don't
furniture.
want to go against Sarah's captaincy because she's going to be like, you know,
Yeah, well, what are you doing? And she's
what are you
just way
doing, bro?
better at it than me, right? Like,
Yeah,
why?
exactly.
Why would I
Why
even
pretend?
want to be the captain? Why
Yeah.
pretend that I know
Yeah.
what colors we should paint this thing when I'm half colorblind? Like what? Like why? Like right? Like what? That's crazy, right? That's that humbleness we go back to, right? Of being like,
Mm,
no, you should totally lead. So there, the leadership of a man is to know when not to lead, right?
mm.
When to be like, you do this because and encourage you. You're amazing at this. You have this skill. God has given you this talent. Use it. And setting up for your people an ability to do that. Like, here's a budget. Go and make our home beautiful, right? And don't ask me,
Or
like,
here's a project and you take it up. and then
And
I
then
will just sit back and I'm going to focus on what I want to do.
that's right.
And just come to me if you want something or you need
Yeah,
something, or
you want a
I'll
second
check
eyes
up
or
on you.
whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
you take the reins of it, you know?
But you're taking the reins. This is your gift. This is your talent, and that's where we complement each other, right? It's like I will push things forward. I'm very goal. So I'm Aries. You talk about I'm Aries, right? So I'm governed by Mars. So I'm fire and very goal oriented, right? The detriment to that is I can like stomp over people to reach my goals,
Mm,
right? So I have to be conscious of that and be like that. I'm not allowing that to dominate or rule me. And that's why I also agree that it's important to know your psychological makeups, but not necessarily be like, don't use it as an excuse. To, oh, well, I'm Aries, so that it's like, well, no,
just
that's not
gonna
an, yeah.
stomp and stomp and
So I'm
stomp.
just gonna get to stomp all over you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
No,
yeah,
that's not growth, right? We need to be
yeah.
like, oh, that's my nature. Where is that a benefit? But where is that also a weakness? And
Mm.
start to acknowledge again the polarity of that. It's both my biggest strength and my biggest weakness is that I'm so goal oriented,
For me,
right?
it's my independence. I'm really good at being by myself, but it's also my biggest weakness because I forget to connect to other people and be like,
Right.
you have strengths I don't, and I'm pretending I can do all of this by myself, but really I can't. I'm just half-assing it because I have no idea what I'm doing, you know? And I think coming back to like Andrew Tate or anybody really is that
Yeah.
I don't think anybody actually really knows what they're doing. They've just found something that works and they're comfortable
Yes.
with that and they're just pushing. But at the end of the day, you're like they're also just figuring it out as they go. They're just like, yeah, I'm just doing
100%.
it, bro. I
Yeah.
found this works, and now I'm just doing it, bro. So
Yeah, someone actually said to me, they're like, "Why? Like you've it was a friend of mine. We jumped on a call, and he was asking me some advice around his YouTube channel as such.
Mm,
And he said, "You have stuck to this message of semen retention like consistently now for 3 going into 4 years, and you still create, content." And I'm like, "Look, I'll never run out of ideas of how to apply this, right?" And he said, "How did you just stay consistent?" So because he's like, I figured like you can only talk about something so much and you have to move on, right? And I said, "Here's the deal. I found what works for me."
mm.
I said, "It works for me." I said, "I've tried other things. I've literally been like, I'm going to talk about other stuff now, and it just doesn't go anywhere." And then I'm like, "Well, I'm going to do this other stuff
Just go
now."
back here.
And so I'm
Just
just
go
like, let's
back to
just go
semen
back to
retention.
what works.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, why
And
why
every
fix
time
what isn't broken? Yeah, yeah,
that's right. And that's exactly
yeah.
what I said. I'm like, so I don't fix what I said. So what I've found over time, and this is where I feel alignment in my calling, is that when I do this, it works at a level that nothing else works. So therefore, I'm surrendering to what is working for me in my life. It's not necessarily that everybody can do this. It's
Mm,
this is what's working for me. And that's what I think you're talking about. Like a guy like Tate. A Tate found what works for him for what he wants to do. So
mm,
he's doubling and tripling down on it and he's just hammering it and hammering it. I remember this lesson from 50 Cent. Okay. So rapper 50 Cent said this. They were like, "Hey, how come after his second or third album, because he was getting criticized that it was pretty much like the same thing. It followed the same formula and everything." And 50 Cent was so blunt. He said this. He said, "Look, you're not going to see anything new from me because this works."
mm,
He says, "What I found was a rhythm and a flow and a style that works." He says, "The day you'll see something new from me is when it no longer works." He's like, "But as long as my audience
works.
likes
Yeah.
this, I'm doing it for them. I'm going to put out albums like this because this is what works. And I'm going to keep doing it until it doesn't work." And so it was like I remember like listening to that as a young man and going, "Well, that just makes sense, right?" He found something that works, and so he's doubling down and tripling down on it. And so we all can find things that work in all areas of our life. Oh, when I do this, it works. Great. So do it more, right? Why reinvent the wheel? Just do it again, and get better at it. And I like the Bruce Lee quote that says, "I don't fear the man who's practiced 1,000 kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 1,000
Thousand
times."
times. Yeah, yeah.
Get so good at one thing or two things or a couple things that you're so undeniably good at it, you've developed such a process that works, the world will pay you for it, not just in money, but the world will literally reward you in
Mm-mm.
experiences and growth for developing something that's
That
so
works.
undeniably good. And that
That works
works.
for you. Yeah,
That
yeah.
works. It's useful. It works.
And
Great. Put it out
it's not
there.
anything that's like generally outside of oneself. It's
No.
generally a passion or some sort of thing that I am originally very good at, that was instilled in
Yes.
me from the time I was born, even before I was born. It's something that I was born with. It's generally those things that we end up sharing with the world, that have our flavor and that authentic version of ourselves. That's what people connect to. I always say this, it's that authenticity of who you are, not who you're trying to be, but who you are, that people really connect to at the end of the
Yeah.
day.
I
And that
love that.
comes through that's one of the benefits I've seen through my own semen retention practice, coming back to semen retention, is that it's helping me to become more aware of who I am, because I'm not spending my energy on so many unnecessary things. I have so much energy going through me that I'm actually like, I have to look at myself and I have to be like, who am I? Am I that desire? Am I that inkling to go and do that temporary pleasure? I'm not, you know. But who am I really? I am this creative person. I am this, person who wants to be engaged with the world. So how do I do that? And then trying different things out that I'm good at, or that I think I'm good at, until I find whatever it is that works for me, which is again the thing that I'm probably aware of but unaware of. It's a thing that's there, but I'm not paying attention to it half the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, like, it could be like a skill set. Like, for example, one thing that I've been good at my whole life naturally is communicating. I've always been a really good speaker, right? Now that can have different expressions. I can go and speak at business conferences about business things, or I can speak about spiritual things, or I can speak about political excuse me,
Is it
political things.
speaking? Is it speaking, or is it making connection?
Well, I guess what I'm talking about is the skill set of actually being able to be clear, communicative, having like a dominant resonant voice, right?
Mm,
Of that. Now, yes, I'm also really good at making connection because they're leadership qualities. So
mm,
I was born with certain leadership qualities, but the expression has found many different expressions in my life. Right. Being able to like, for instance, develop a team in a network marketing business that I was doing, growing a cleaning company. Now we're doing Nikulada's training grounds, and we're building the Powerhouse Man training facility and what we're doing there. But I recognize it's the same, let's say, natural inclinations in all of them.
mm,
Right? There's a very natural like things that I do well that I've always done well. I am on a stage ever since I was a kid, and I was part of, like, I was Scrooge in the Christmas play, and I was, right, and Thelonious Monk and We Has Jazz, the grade 6 jazz play, right? I always took the big roles. I was able to, fill up the stage, and there was a natural like, whoa, you're like, like if you ever hear me speak live or anything like that, it's like there's an energy that comes through me that is wild, right? And so it's just, but it's always been there. So it's a
mm,
natural inclination, or it's like in this life I have that ability. It's not something that I was taught. Now, just because you have a natural, I love the book Talent is Never Enough. It doesn't mean that I can't hone it and sharpen it and
mm,
get good at it, right? And then it could become something very useful. Because in the negative side, I can capture attention, but in school, I used to do that to just be the class clown. It just right. I
like
could
you,
throw
you
the
you
whole.
don't know, what to do with it, basically. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you don't know what
yeah,
to do with it, so you
yeah,
end up
yeah.
doing some
You
nonsense with
you
it,
end
right?
up like flopping it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
totally,
yeah,
right? You just end
yeah,
up
yeah.
wasting it. So it's important that even once we discover our nature or these natural gifts or inclinations, that we recognize we still now have to put the effort into honing it,
You're honing
getting
and
good at it,
practicing. Yeah, yeah,
practicing it,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
the swordsman who's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"Oh, I can do this. Like I'm naturally good at it." But are you willing now to spend day in, day
yeah.
out
And just
just
chop, chop,
chopping,
chop.
chopping, chopping,
That's
right?
it's
Yeah.
funny you're saying that, because the other day I was teaching a Reiki course, and it was one student that arrived and I had three students coming, and I was sitting here and I had a very frustrating day, and then for some reason I just kept thinking, I just want to practice. That's all I want to do. I pictured myself sitting in like a Chinese temple. I had like robe cloth pants on, and I was just sitting in the middle of like the meditation room, and all I could think of, I just want to practice. So now that you're saying that, it's like it's becoming more clear what I was thinking. I
Yeah.
just want to practice and just hone what I'm
Just
doing
want
at
to
the
hone the
moment. Like
skill. Yeah.
that's what I really am
There's
craving in myself, is just honing what I'm doing, you know.
Well, it's funny, and this is when you get clarity of purpose, just to
Mm.
reflect about this. So there is there's and I'm not gonna say his name because I will mess it up, but he's a Japanese samurai. He's very famous, Japanese samurai,
I think it,
Miyamoto or something
yeah,
like
yeah,
this.
something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
sure, sure.
So one of the things he says is that you don't need wealth, you need time. Because he's like, I didn't want money, I didn't want fame. What I needed was time, and he lived very simply, so he had the time to just chop and
Sure.
practice and become and then that eventually gave him money and
The
fame,
money,
everything, right? And
because he
everything that
got good at that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because he got so
Yeah,
undeniably good. Now
yeah.
even
Okay,
we're talking about him and he's long past, but we're still
sure,
talking about him
sure.
because he was so and that's what he says. He says, I needed the time to practice. That's what I needed. So I kept my life simple. I made sure everything was very simple. So I had time. And what I did with that time is I practiced my sword skills. I practiced my word skills. As funny as when I gave up everything else, all the other roles that I could have potentially gone down. And I've been on some crossroads in my life where I'm like, I can go this way or that way. Equally, I could have decided to keep in the world of politics. And I'm sure over time, I would have become more and more successful because I was already doing well and picking up steam in that road. But I didn't want to go down that road because just for a lot of reasons other than I just don't believe that that's actually helping people, right? At its core, I didn't really believe I was being of the best service that I could be to the world in that space. But I could have. And I
Mm.
remember we were having I was getting death threats at the time, and we were in the heat of a lot of like drama, right? And I went on a drive with my wife and I said, we were basically having this discussion. Is this going to be the road we're going to go down?
Mm.
Is this going to be the life story? And we decided no. And I said, I need a big game to play because I'm a big thinker, I'm big vision, right? And I'm like, if I don't have a big game to play, I just find
You're gonna get bored. Yeah,
100%. I get
yeah,
bored, and that's when I get into trouble,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's when I start finding nonsense to do, right? So I said, I need a big game to play. And it was my wife, Sarah, said, look at the work you're doing with men. Like, because I was already running the semen retention army and I was already doing these things, right? I basically ran it part time and was generating income, like full time income. And I wasn't even like giving that much to it because half my attention was going to politics, right?
yeah.
She said, "Put everything into that. Why don't you become a massive why don't you become big at that? And look at this is really helping people. Like this helps people." And I was like, "You're absolutely right." And that was the day I resigned as a candidate. I resigned myself from the party. I gave it all up and said, "I'm done with this." We shut down all of our political accounts and everything. And then I was like, and then I dedicated myself. I'm like, I'm going to become a world class trainer. Like I'm going to be such a great coach. That's my new game. And then what I started to do is I started to see every coaching call, every sales call as practice. And
Mm.
how can I get better on these calls? How can I ask better questions to my students to give them breakthrough? How can we make this program better? How can we do this? How and since I've been doing that, everything has gotten better and better and better. So now our programs are better, our support is better, our videos are better.
And you just got to keep clicking when the energy is there. Just keep clicking it and clicking it and clicking it and clicking it.
That's it. And so
Just
it's just
keep,
like I'm
yeah, yeah, yeah.
swinging that sword
Chopping now.
every
Yeah,
day, every call. How
yeah,
can
yeah.
I make this call transformative? How can I do this podcast better? Like, so it's just this constant improvement, but not from a space of lack of like, I'm not good enough,
Yeah, yeah.
but
But
from a,
because there's actually something there.
yeah, it's like, how do we make this better? Make
Yeah,
this
yeah,
better. It's like, I'm
yeah,
excited to make it better,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So it's again, that
You
intention.
don't feel like pressured, like from like
No.
a, I'm not worthy, so I need to
Yeah.
improve this, that it's the opposite. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Eh,
opposite. It's like, this is
yeah.
working. Make it better. Make it better. Make it better. So I feel a bit
Mm.
like that warrior who knows he's swinging the sword, but he knows it's better. It's better. I've been doing this for a month straight. I'm better at it. I'm more
Because my
precise.
sword is sharp and
That's right.
I've been practicing, man.
Yeah, it's
And
tune,
while you were saying
tune.
that whole thing with the politics and stuff like that, I was just thinking about this the story I heard the other day. So I researched, I was YouTubing the idea of working smarter, not harder. And
Mm,
this guy, I listened to the story where these people were working in a factory, and what the guy said was that the whole factory went out of power, and they were like, the people there couldn't figure out what was going on, so they had to phone the specialist, and they're like, hey man, please come help us. This is not working. We don't know what to do. We tried everything. So the guy comes in within like 10 minutes. He finds a box. He opens the box. He looks at the switches. He goes, click, closes the box. Everything comes on. Boop. And then he gives them a check, 20,000 Rand. And he was like, no ways. I'm paying you to 20,000
yeah.
bucks just to flip a switch. And he was like, it's not about flipping the switch. It's about knowing which switch to flip. And that has taken many, many years of practice. But it's also understanding that if you had done that by yourself, you would have been flipping everything like
Yeah.
you guys were. But me, I know how to work smarter and I know what's what. So click, everything
This is
worked again.
this
Yeah.
there's a similar story I'll share with you, and it's to get to just hone the point you've made, which is that so there was an artist sitting in a restaurant, and he was a famous artist, and someone came up to him and said, "Oh my goodness, like I'm such a big fan, da 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 da. Would you draw me something?" So he takes a pencil and he takes a piece of paper and he draws this picture, and then he's like, it's 10,000 or whatever the number he gave. And the guy was like, there's no way I'm paying that. Like, that only took you 2 minutes. And he goes, that did not take me 2 minutes. That took me a lifetime of drawing and studying to be able to do that in 2 minutes. And I was having this conversation actually with one of our guys in the Powerhouse Man training just yesterday about working harder, not smarter. And I said to him,
I
I
mean,
said, you,
smarter, not harder.
yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah,
Go on to do the other
yeah. That's
one.
right. I said, you want to become so undeniably good at what you do that people no longer pay you for your time, they pay you for your value.
Mm.
I said, as long as you're selling your time, now we're going into like business principles, but as long as you're selling your time, you will be nickeled and dimed and people will put a time value. Learn to sell your value. And it doesn't matter. Like I've said to guys, oh, how much is the course? And I'll give them the price. You know, my highest course is $10,000 US right now, 6-month training with me. Oh my God, $10,000, da da da. But how many hours you gonna spend with me? I said, well, what if I spent 1 hour with you, but in that hour you learned the exact thing you needed to do to go make 100 grand? I said, "Is that would you if I
10,000
can
Rand
help?"
straight away, bro.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said,
Yeah.
you would pay me 10 grand if every time you
Immediately.
pay me 10 grand, you got 100 grand, you would be paying me daily 10 grand. I charge you 10 grand a day, and you would be happy to pay it. I
Mm-hmm.
said, so you're not paying me for my time, because if you want to pay me for my time, you have to backtrack about 15 years from my right, and you could
Where I
backtrack
started,
about
yeah.
$100,000 I've invested into my own growth over the last 15 years to do what I do for men today in the time that I could do it. I'm like, also, I'm saving you. How much time am I saving you in your life? Like that's the guy to switch.
Because
I
I
was like,
went through that myself, and now I'm telling you the quick, not the quick route, but I'm telling you,
yeah,
I'm helping you miss all the waste
yeah.
of energy. Yeah, yeah,
That's right. I said you're gonna
yeah,
waste you that factory still might not be running. You know, if you guys did if you did pay the 20 rand
yeah,
and let them do that, right? Right there here. And I'm like, how much revenue loss?
yeah.
So when somebody starts to shift their mindset about money, specifically in abundance, when you start to recognize that what we pay for is value, not time,
Mm.
right? It's value. Then if somebody's like listening and goes, I want to make more money in my life, stop thinking about wanting to make more money and start asking yourself, how can I
How
be
can I?
more valuable?
Yes,
And that
exactly.
goes back to do whatever you do at such a high level, like be so undeniably good at it that people will literally pay. You know, it's $1 million to work with Tony Robbins for a year, cash. Like you have to be able to transfer $1 million into his bank account to work with him as a coach.
But you
People
know
pay that.
that you're gonna get what you
Yeah,
pay for. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, 100%. Because you're like, it's worth it. because to
Mm,
work with a guy at that level, he'll bring you up to that level in no time. So why wouldn't you?
mm,
So it's all, again, it's a mindset shift that has a profound way in the way that we show up and that the way that we think about our day and how we execute our day. It's like, you're not paying me for my time. You're paying me for my ability to bring you up to a whole new standard and energy within a short period of time, and for you literally to save years of mistakes that I've made.
mm,
That's what
mm.
you're paying for.
That's the value in it, yeah.
It's
And
the value
what you can do with it, yeah.
and what
And
you could do.
and
The the
so
the
so
the the
yeah.
alchemy course is $1,000 to take the course. I said, how much energy are you wasting every time you're watching pornography or wasting your
And how
semen?
much will you continue to waste unless you do something
Yeah,
about it? And here's a solution for you, but
yeah.
you have to invest into it. Otherwise, like, you're gonna get it but not value it, you know?
Yeah, you're not gonna
Yeah.
value it. I said, "So you
Mm,
gotta you're paying for the value, not the time."
mm,
And
mm.
and we should know that also as men. You're not paying for the time. And same thing in your relationships and stuff. Some relationships aren't the people you spend the most time with, but it's the ones you give the most value
Value
to.
to, yeah.
And you feel this connection. Like, there's some people you've only met a couple times, but you're like, they're just like, you just hold them to such a high
Valuable people.
value.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
because 'cause
yeah.
they're valuable to you, not
Mm,
because they're around you, it's because they are valuable to you. So when you start thinking in terms of value, it really shifts your perception of the way you interact, and it shifts the way that you carry out your day. Because 'cause you're like, "What's the highest value?" And again, like, the swordsman was to be able to swing the sword, not and that's his value. So
and just coming back to what we're doing is that it starts with the basics. All of what we're talking
oh,
about is like you have to come in with the basics. And one of the basic principles of becoming a person of value is to retain your semen, but not only retain your semen, is that to realize who you are through the practice of retention. Because retention by itself, like it's without it actually sparking deeper thoughts within yourself and bringing you to deeper realizations of who you are, what this world is about and my place in the world, then you're missing all the value. But it starts with those simple practices at the end of the day. At least that's what I'm seeing through my own practice and being linked with you and the courses and being linked with my spiritual teachings and or my spiritual teacher and so on and so forth, is that the basics are important. And
yeah.
if you don't start with the basics, then good luck.
Yeah,
Good luck.
yeah. Everybody wants to be a black belt, but everybody has to start at a white belt,
Start
right?
somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
And not to worry about what people think just because I'm
yeah.
just starting, no matter where you are. It's
You
about the
just start from where you're at. Yeah, you just
yeah,
start
exactly.
you're at progress over perfection. You just
Mm,
progress, 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 and focus on quality. Time will naturally take care of getting to higher levels of mastery and quantity. You focus on quality and progression, and
mm,
everything else will take care of itself essentially.
mm. And I just wanted to add one thing to working smarter, not harder, is that
Mm.
working smarter, not harder doesn't mean not working hard.
No.
I just realized that while you were talking, is that
Yeah,
when you find the smart choice, work hard at that smart choice,
that's right.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, because that's what's going to produce the results, whatever results you're
yeah.
looking for, work
It's
hard at
really both.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You have to work hard, but make sure you're working smart,
mm,
that you're
yeah,
getting the most from your effort. You're
yeah.
doing the
You're
activities.
squeezing all the
You're
juice out of it.
squeezing, yeah, yeah, you're getting the most. I've got this activity for the guys who run businesses that I work with called the $10,000 activity
Mm.
list, right?
I know,
Where
yeah,
they
yeah.
have to,
You
yeah,
break it
where
down into
you
your,
break it
yeah, yeah,
down. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
And you break down your highest activities, and I help them to pinpoint what are the highest activities. And that one exercise has a profound shift in the way people carry out their day and their ability to go generate more income and lead their businesses to higher levels, because what they do is they start recognizing, oh, I'm spending a lot of time, I'm working hard, but I'm spending my time on low return activities. If I spend the exact same amount of time, so I'm still working hard, but I'm doing it on these higher level activities, my returns come in bigger. And that's what it generally is. It's like, you're probably putting your if you're doing something but not experiencing the fullest of the result, you're probably doing something you don't need to do, and you need to
And
replace it with a higher
you're wasting
quality
your energy.
activity.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
you're wasting, yeah, you're not getting the most from your energy. And that
Mm.
means elevating your thought process. And again, that's why mentors and coaches and trainers and gurus exist, because what they're going to teach you is no, no, yeah, shift it, do work hard, but
But
here,
here,
look
not
this way.
there.
Yeah, look this way, not there. Look
Just there.
here and put it there. And
And
then what you'll notice
the thing
is
is,
the
I
compensation
notice
is
is that
bigger.
I already know exactly where I need to be, but I will forsake myself and just go in every other direction until I hit my head and I realize I just need to do that one. Just
Just
that
do that.
one. That
And
one.
and a secret to it is generally it's the thing you're resisting the
Yeah.
most that you need
It
to do.
always is. Yeah, it always is.
It
I
always
know
is. Yeah.
exactly. It's the one
Yeah.
thing I keep putting off. And I know
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the thing I need to do right now as we speak. And it's always the thing that I'm just like, I just never have time
Yeah.
for it, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it
It's
is
the
the
thing that
thing I need to
yeah.
do, you know?
That's why you're like, I don't have time for it. Because actually, when you do it, it's an identity crisis. You're gonna start taking
Mm,
action outside of your identity, which is
comfort
gonna
zone, yeah.
take you outside of your experience. And
Mm,
what we have to know is unconsciously, the subconscious mind tries to keep us safe by keeping us in the same realm or frequency we're in. So it sees anything new as a danger. Like, oh, an unknown is a danger. If I go and do that thing I'm resisting, that means I'm actually no longer going to identify as the same person. I'm expanding who I am. And that's why we feel a resistance. So one way to know if you're growing is how uncomfortable are you? The
mm,
more uncomfortable you are, good job. Keep
good
going in
job.
that direction.
That's great. So just to slowly come to like the
Yeah.
bottleneck of this series and just to or this episode and just tie it off a little bit. Where can people find you? I mean, you can say all the channels you work through, and then I'll also drop some links at the bottom. But yeah, if people are looking for some advice or want to try something out, you know, where can they find you? Where are they
Yeah.
looking? What? Yeah.
So, I mean, if you go to nakuladas.com, that's my website. It acts as a hub to everything else.
Okay.
Then, my YouTube channel, I definitely recommend subscribing to my YouTube channel because there's so many videos there, and we're constantly putting out new videos, and we're bettering as our commitment to keep getting better. We're putting out better videos now, where I'm gonna be sharing more practices people could take part in, the basics. But ultimately, nakuladas.com. And there you can contact me directly. You could send me an email. And if you're really serious, if you want to jump on a call, we schedule a call. But the first place is the website, nakuladas.com.
Yeah. And yeah, if you're listening to this podcast by any chance that you've made it this far into the podcast, almost 2 hours, yeah, I will be dropping nikuladas.com, the link down in the description below. And yeah, you can just click it and go on over and check it out. I'm sure from my experience, you won't be sorry. If you're looking to make a change in your life and you have nowhere, you've tried things or you don't know what to do, go to someone who knows what they're doing. Nakula is putting in the work. I see it every single day in the group. And yeah, so that's what we want, right? You want to follow someone who's doing the work. Nakula's doing the work the best that he can. And yeah, so
Thank you, man.
I'm
Appreciate
inspired. I always get inspired through our talks. I always realize things about what I need to do because sometimes I sit and I'm just like, I don't know what I need to do. So talking to you always brings me to a point of clarity and, or at least helps me along the path of clarity. And yeah, so I appreciate it a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing in the world and being an awesome member of our community as well. You inspire me,
Hey,
get me
you've
my
given me
workouts
something,
going.
man. Yeah, you've given me something, man. I can just contribute by being the best version of myself, at least at the moment. So
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah, that's how I show my appreciation to you. So thanks. Yeah. So is there anything you want to say just to tie everything off? Like, yeah.
Um, Look, if we talked about a lot of cool stuff. I love the discussion. So first of all, thank you everybody who's just tuned in and watched. We appreciate your time. I truly believe time is the most valuable resource anyone has. It's the one thing you can't get back. You can get money back and you can get this back and that back, but you can't get time. So just want to acknowledge everybody who's been with us. And if you've listened this far and you're like, hey, I really want to experience those higher level practices of alchemy, of retention, of what it can do, and you are essentially information is one thing, but application is where the true results happen. So you can listen to us talk all day long, but you won't get the results from that. You're going to get the results
As you
by
put it.
applying it and
Yeah, yeah,
putting it
yeah.
into action. So reach out to me, connect. I would love to connect with you, put a plan of action together, and take tangible steps forward. That's how we go from theory and philosophy and inspiration to actual results. The medium is action. So take action on what
But
inspired you.
also
Take
right
action on what
action.
you
Yeah,
learned.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
doing the
right
right
action.
yeah,
Yeah.
not just
The right
a
action at
random
the
action.
right time.
Yeah, at the right time. Okay. Yes, thank you very much again. I appreciate having you on here, and yeah, I appreciate the conversation. It's always good. So